I'm Rolika Roach, and welcome to the Live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, June 6, 2018. At this time, I invite the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Michael Ferrier, to address you. Minister.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the press, colleagues, listeners, viewers, people of St. Martin, wherever you are. It's another beautiful day in paradise. Just want to talk about a phenomena that we have confronted ever since we came into office, basically. Almost on a weekly basis, I get confronted by people who say, government owes me money and I can't seem to get paid. Can you check on what services or goods they have provided? And almost every time when we dig in, we find that goods and services have been delivered to government without the proper procurement procedures have been followed, which means that very often somebody who knows somebody would pick up the phone and say, I need this and this and this for my office to keep running, and the supplier wanting to help government, which we say thanks for the wanting to help, would deliver the goods, deliver the services, and then of course present an invoice. The invoice would then be presented for payment, and then the checks and balances of government would kick in, whereby the finance department says, well, I need to see a purchase order, I need to see a paper trail, I need to see whatever it takes for a purchase or a purchase of government from a supplier to be performed in the correct fashion. And then payment would stop. The payment system, the payment procedure, the process would stop, simply because the checks and balance would say, hey, not everything is in place, so this cannot be paid. And so when a supplier is nice enough to do someone in government a favor to provide them with services or goods, it is appreciated, of course, but it should not happen that way. And of course, it starts with the organization. Government should not call on friends or suppliers or people that they know and ask for services or goods to be provided to government without following the proper procedure. The result of it, unfortunately, though, is that the supplier of the goods and services is out the service or the goods, and government doesn't pay. And then we end up in situations. We found bills that are over 3 years old, invoices that are floating around somewhere because they get stuck because the proper procedure wasn't followed. And as I said, when it gets to finance, the checks and balances take over. They kick in, and the folks there say, we can't pay because this and this and this is missing. The reason I bring this up is because, I think it is bad, terrible for a supplier of goods and services to, put out their goods and services and not get paid for it. And secondly, it creates a situation for government where we think we owe X, but we owe X plus, because all over the place we're finding invoices that have not been paid. So what I'm asking, and what I'm going to make a public a request to all suppliers on this island, if you're going to do business with government, make sure you do it in accordance with the procedures that are expected. Now, of course, again, it starts with our own organization. Our employees need to make sure they follow the correct procurement procedure. Make sure they have the authority to be able to make a purchase. And I'm asking all suppliers on St. Martin, do not supply government with any service or any item without having proper papers in your hand that will guarantee you will get paid on time. That is just something I think we need to put out there because, as I say again, government must operate in the correct fashion, but also what I see in some of these, the way how some of these invoices come across, is that maybe some suppliers think, well, if I provide a service and I provide a good and I give a bill and I give an invoice, government must pay. Well, there's simply a procedure that government must follow because we're talking about taxpayers' money that needs to be dealt with in a correct fashion. And so I ask all suppliers, if you are asked to supply government with anything, make sure whoever asks you to supply that service or good provides you with the proper authorization from an appropriate person or department to be able to make that kind of purchase on behalf of government. That way you protect yourself, and this way government doesn't end up in a bigger problem than it thinks it already is in. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Ferrier, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Yoreen White, to address you. Minister?
Good morning, Mrs. Roach. Good morning to the members of the media, those listening in, DCOM, and of course my colleague ministers. Good morning. It's been a while. I believe I had to skip last week, but I'm very happy to indeed inform you with some variety of updates, especially now that the hurricane season formally started, of course, since June 1st. I'm therefore very happy that together with my ministry, we were able to advance with some of the critical recovery and disaster preparedness initiatives. And the ministry, together with critical stakeholders, followed through, therefore, with what we discussed earlier in the year. And that was that we would indeed focus on planning in the first quarter, and that the second quarter, this quarter, would focus on activities such as workshops and conversations to enhance and activate our preparedness levels. I requested that would happen, and indeed they followed through, and I'm extremely happy also that we had a very strong bond and strong partnership with UNICEF. And last week, therefore, May 28th to June 1st, the ministry started in collaboration with UNICEF and coordinated with the Department of Education, and they hosted and organized a series of master trainings on safety and emergency response for the sector that I represent. Conducted by UNICEF trainer Marcel Goyenesh, the first 3 days of the workshops focused on safety planning in schools, and the last 2 days of the workshops were geared towards the daycare centers and the sports and cultural organizations that are also part of my ministry. The main objective of this workshop was to ensure that not only schools, but also other key organizations tied to my ministry become more knowledgeable, more prepared, and better organized in handling disasters and risks that go beyond hurricanes. The sessions involved outlined steps to organize an emergency plan, the tools to identify hazards and sources, and development of a standard operating procedure. A number of the trainers are now conducting the second round of trainings for individual schools this week, and I hope to see and experience some of the hands-on sessions in the schools to improve our preparedness. I hereby express sincere appreciation to our partnership with UNICEF that started and intensified since post-Irma last year, and also of the staff and initiative of the staff of the Department of Education. I'm sure the Prime Minister is also happy to understand that this sector partners with the EUC in ensuring that indeed everybody does their share, including the continued participation of the teachers and entire school system. I'm also pleased to announce that the Division of Study Finance advanced and that I will go and sign off, I believe, the majority of all study financing recipient requests this week. In total, 176 persons submitted an application for study financing for this academic year 2018-2019. And in compared to 2017, there were 179. So where we expected an increase, that actually rather did not happen because it's a little less than 2017. Maybe that may be related to indeed the impact of Irma with some of the students that may have already left us and are therefore already advancing with their studies and their enrollment in tertiary education elsewhere. 17 applicants withdrew their applications, and as such, 159 applications were submitted to the Study Financing Committee for advice and further advice towards me as Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. I must say it's not an easy task, an assignment that I have, to look at individual requests. Everybody may know, the members of the press may know, that it's based on a priority list. It was the same priority list that was officially approved by the previous minister, and there always will be pros and cons associated with the application of the priority list and the extent to which we are able to address indeed labor needs. And therefore, when you review some of the individual requests, you may wonder, is this a priority for St. Martin, yes or no? Should we indeed invest in this area, yes or no? It has been a very intense activity for me and my cabinet, and of course for the entire study financing division throughout the last couple of months. I do hope that the recently approved study finance ordinance that it's on its way for debate and approval in Parliament will further assist this process and create transparency and assistance to a very critical process, and that is of course the enrollment of our students into tertiary education elsewhere in the region, and therefore the investment of our country in human capital. Some of the data that they made available for the applications are that 35% of the applicants were male, and 65 therefore were female. And that therefore says something about the outnumbering of the ratio female to male with 2 to 1, which is an interesting development that will require further review, analysis and understanding. 58% of all applications are for countries in the region, such as the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean region. And compared to the 58, 42% with an interest to access Europe. The most popular place of study, therefore, remains to be the US, followed by the Netherlands, and then Canada. The average age of the applicants increased somewhat to 20 years old. And the oldest applicant that submitted, which is interesting, was 55. And probably want to indeed consider possibilities to further advance studies as well. And the youngest applicant was 16. 42%, so 97 of the applications are from students who are presently therefore in exam classes in secondary education, secondary schools on island, while 8% of the applications are from persons who are already in tertiary level education and therefore would want to advance further. The balance, 50%, came from persons who are not attending school presently, which is a very important analysis and observations as well that we have to continue to follow. 50% of the applicants were not in school and therefore may have completed their studies last year, but needed a year in between. In Dutch they now term it as een tussenjaar before they advance further. May this be associated with the choices that they may wanted to postpone, not certain what they would study, may it be related to financial challenges, may it be related to maybe following a GED exam in order to strengthen their results and therefore improve their possibility to advance in tertiary education. The top 5 most popular areas of studies are business administration and management. That's their interest, not considered a priority study, by the way. That's what I've been informed. Psychology and social sciences, medical and life sciences, ICT, computer sciences, and number 5, accounting and finance. You will, and the students will be further informed in the weeks ahead, so that indeed the advancement of the preparations of their departure will follow. We just recently in the Council of Ministers also approved the travel associated with either going to the Caribbean or to the US or the Netherlands. I also have been informed by the director of the exam bureau, Dr. Anders Yvette Holly, that indeed the FBE exit examination results are in for primary schools. And I must compliment Mrs. Holly with her entire team for the immediate and speedy availability of the results, because we were very eager to follow what would happen after the impact of Irma. Would we have seen a change in the patterns from the previous year? A deterioration maybe of the results? Would that indeed be a signal that we have to take a closer look? 509 students sat the FBE exit examination, therefore, in the week of May 21st to 24th, and the results are available. The outcome, in terms of the nationwide average, is that the overall nationwide grade average of 4 subjects altogether is 61%, and the nationwide average for mathematics is 59%, for general knowledge 58%, the nationwide average for English is 76%, and the nationwide average for Dutch is 50%. There is therefore an improvement in the scores for the subjects of Dutch, English, and general knowledge, and I think that is definitely something that we should recognize and therefore encourage the students and the teachers and be thankful and supportive of these results in these enormous trying times. I will not go over the details. We can, of course, look at the various schools, their accomplishments, the highest achiever, but I will not do that. I already received the eye of our Prime Minister saying, like, let's make sure that we monitor the time. The previous years, as I said, were less, and this year better, with exception of mathematics, and the reasons for this will have to be reviewed and discussed further. Once more, congratulations to the teachers. They worked hard. The school boards, they worked hard. The students, their parents, for their support. It is amazing. And either our cup is half full, half empty, or we just make sure that we have a smaller cup. Huh? It's half full? Okay. That means that we're an optimist, right, Mike? There we go. We're optimists, and that's important to share, and I hope, press, that you will make this part of your headlines, which is important to acknowledge in the way forward. I have something other that I think is related to half full of the cup. There will be a press briefing, press conference later today, and I hope that the members of the press will join again. We will get together with the Windward Island Teachers Union as we came to an agreement and a conclusion about the matters related and associated with the career development perspectives for the teachers. Very critical, very relevant. We've seen these developments and debates throughout the entire Caribbean region. There's a shortage of teachers, and that needs to be addressed, and therefore we have decided to establish the committee for which we will inform you further. There is also a highlight and important progress related to the objective to restructure and improve the performance of the public schools. I have always considered to be an enormous challenge with the public schools, and we would like to share some information to the press this afternoon. In addition to that, as you may recall, in March we created a Creative Industries Interactive Exchange Forum to develop indeed the orange economy and the creative industries. There will be a debriefing session June 11th with some of the participants to review the possibilities of the creative industries, because the report has been made available. I've also ensured that the Socio-Economic Council will receive a letter through the Prime Minister requesting their assistance to review the possibilities of the creative industries as an economy of growth. And I therefore requested their assistance to do a feasibility study to the extent, to review the extent that the creative industries can contribute to economic growth and the GDP. The debriefing session, June 11th, will be with a wide group again, and where we will discuss the possibilities and the conclusion to introduce the Artists Guild this year, and also to establish the Culture Prize. Now, I mentioned, and that's the last part of my information and updates. There is something else that I was extremely happy about, and was happy to join yesterday as well, because indeed, sometime around the midst of July, our dear St. Maarten athletes will be part of the St. Maarten Promising Athletes program, and they will travel with members of the St. Maarten Sports and Olympic Federation to the Central American and Caribbean Games, the CAC Games, due to be held from July 19th to August 3rd in Barranquilla, Colombia. We have secured indeed support for their travel. This is the first time in our history that they are not only, of course, they have participated to these games before, but these games are now recognized as qualifying games for the Olympics. And that is a significant change. And that's there for the first time that St. Maarten will come out and participate as a country. I think we need to do everything we can to support these young athletes and not so young athletes. I've been informed and I've seen them last night. The national team has been going through extensive trainings and preparations over the last few years. Indeed, as I mentioned, the success in these games in July will indeed ensure participation in the Pan American Games in 2019, and which could potentially lead to the Olympic Games in Japan, I believe, in 2020. Yeah, so once more, we have to be thankful for this wonderful progress. I joined them last night. The St. Maarten Sports and Olympic Federation officially kicked off their participation to these games, and they highlighted their athletes and showcased them. They did a kind of a fashion show with uniforms, the national uniforms that they will be wearing, their travel uniforms, their sports uniforms. So it all looked fantastic. And I think that is wonderful. And yeah, they will therefore be ready to compete and indeed highlight their ability at their athletics on a larger scale. Lastly, the 2018 primary interscholastic water polo tournament started on Monday, June 4th, and will last this entire week. At its conclusion, the winners, second place team, will receive trophies and medals for all of their hard work during the tournament. The games will come to a close with the finals being played between 11 and 12 p.m. with the possibility of a further game being played depending on the outcome. I don't have more to share, but I can imagine that you may want me to detail things further, but I don't have it here available. So with that said, thank you for the contribution, and then I'm going to join and sit next to Minister of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Weitzer, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Leona Romeo Marlin, to address you. Prime Minister.
A pleasant good morning to all, my colleagues, ministers, members of the press. Good morning, St. Maarten. I have several notices or updates this morning. The first beginning that on Tuesday morning, I received a courtesy visit from the commander of the Netherlands Armed Forces in the Caribbean, Mr. Peter Jan de Vind. Discussions during these meetings centered around preparations for the hurricane season and building on the working relationship between the military and the government of St. Maarten. As a follow-up to the courtesy visit, a detailed high-level meeting will be organized in the month of July. Secondly, the close coordination with the World Bank and the intensive preparations for the first projects is going ahead at full speed. For civil servants, the World Bank recently organized a training on disbursement guidelines to learn about the different arrangements used by the World Bank to disburse funds to recovery projects. On behalf of the Interim Recovery Committee, 5 civil servants that are responsible for the financial management of projects attended the training. On June 12th, the first meeting of the Steering Committee of the Trust Fund will take place in Washington, D.C. Under the Trust Fund, decisions on the financing of recovery and resilience projects are made by the Steering Committee, in which St. Maarten, the World Bank, and the Netherlands are equally represented. During the first meeting of the Steering Committee, St. Maarten's representative, Mr. Marcel Gums, and I will discuss both current and future projects that can be financed by the Trust Fund. The ultimate goal of any of these projects should be to restore secure, and strengthen the well-being of the people of St. Martin. The government of St. Martin will highlight the 3 top priorities of the recovery process right now. These priorities are the basic needs of the people of St. Martin, such as food, shelter, health, and psychosocial care, as well as education and livelihoods. Assistance will have to be provided to vulnerable groups to repair homes, to ensure basic home income, to buy essentials, and we need to find an urgent solution to the long-standing problem of the dump. The second priority is the urgent preparation for the peak of the hurricane season. Emergency shelters must be repaired. Emergency support functions must be fully prepared and public utilities strengthened. And we should always be ready for whatever comes our way. The third top priority is the revitalizing of the economy. And to do this, we will urge the steering committee to provide immediate support to struggling businesses in their recovery efforts and to assist with the reconstruction of St. Martin's most critical infrastructure, especially the airport and hotels, and we are researching the possibility for building social homes. Many of the top priorities will be addressed in the first generation of projects that will be financed by the trust fund. The tendering for these projects is expected to start in the coming weeks. Within the current limits of our market and absorption capacity, the goal of this government is to work as much as possible with the local labor force and local companies that know the island and its people. The funding of the trust fund should give a major boost to the business community and to our economy in general. With this in mind, the government of St. Martin and the World Bank Group have agreed to host a presentation training on the World Bank procurement procedures themed Doing Business with the World Bank. The objective of the presentation is to inform the private sector of St. Martin about the necessary procedures on procurement processes when doing business with the World Bank. The presentation will be held on Wednesday, June 13th from 2 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. at the Bel Air Community Center. During this one-time event, and one of the top specialists of the World Bank will explain the World Bank procedures with a particular focus on procurement and public tendering. I strongly encourage and urge goods providers, consulting services, non-consulting services, and contractors that are interested in doing business with the World Bank to participate in this event. More information can be found on Facebook of the National Recovery Program Bureau and in the newspaper. On another note, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight again that the recruitment process of the National Recovery Program Bureau has begun. The vacancies for director, 2 senior program managers, and other positions are currently open. More vacancies will be published on the government's website, the newspaper, and through social media in the coming weeks. I encourage everyone, and especially young St. Martiners, to keep an eye out for these vacancies. The Bureau will be responsible for the implementation of the recovery and resilience projects that will be financed by the trust fund. It will be headed by a director who is responsible for approximately 20 staff members, including financial management specialists, procurement specialists, safeguard specialists, and individual project leaders. I want to emphasize that all of these positions will be recruited in a transparent manner and in accordance with the World Bank procedures. The success of the Bureau will be essential for the recovery process, so I'm calling on all the bright minds of St. Martin to consider applying for a position in the Bureau. This includes our civil servants who can be temporarily seconded to the Bureau. We need qualified staff to take the recovery process to the next level. And finally, the Council of Ministers and I met with the officials of the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, on Tuesday to officially kick off a 3-day orientation mission to St. Martin. The purpose of the mission is to assist St. Martin in planning of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. St. Martin is expected to receive technical support from ECLAC for the design and implementation of an institutional framework for mainstream sustainable development goals, SDGs, as part of the country's National Development Plan later this year, or National Development later this year. SDGs will be addressed in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan and will also be used as a basis for St. Martin's National Development Plan. The ECLAC's orientation mission to St. Martin is looking to address the institutional and capacity needs of St. Martin's national statistical system. After the orientation, ECLAC will advise on the use of the SDGs related statistical information to support evidence-based policy planning. I want to thank the Minister of Finance for his remarks pertaining to proper procedures, and I would like to add that this also goes for our civil servants that engage in these processes, and note is to be taken through this means to all civil servants that handle payments or acts for assistance outside, that if proven that proper procedures are not followed, that at least this government will look into maybe holding persons personally liable for those actions. I thank you for your attention and await any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing. We now go over to the question and answer session. The floor is open, and Stephen Cerillion of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Prime Minister, Ministers, good morning. My question is for the Minister of Education. Can you remind us again, if you may, as to the list of priority for study financing and how much is set aside for from your budget for study financing?
Good morning. Mr. Stephen, I'm not sure whether you asked whether I should submit it or whether you would like me to highlight it now. Well, it's too extensive to highlight because, of course, the priority list is pretty extensive and long, but we can, of course, share it with the members of the press if so requested. Press officer Mrs. Giselle York is here with me, so let's ensure that after the meeting we exchange email correspondence, and then we will send the priority list because it is extensive in various disciplines and areas, and I don't have it here with me, but otherwise I will be listing various subjects and future professions. So that's one, and that priority list was not from 2018, the same one that was approved last year, 2016-17 I believe, is the one that is still being applied. And I do believe that indeed the country should invest more in the development and the manner in which the priority list comes together. But that will therefore require very, very strong consultation with the economic sector, the private sector, and other NGOs to ensure that it is accurate. Especially in this point in time, we may have a different type of needs due to the different nature of our socio-economic developments. So therefore, we need to take a closer look so that indeed the studies for 2019-2020 academic year have indeed an update priority list. Yeah. So, but we will send that to you in order to assist you with that. That was one part of the question. I thought it had a second part. The budget, of course, has parts of grants and parts of loans that are therefore repaid by students. And on average, I believe, I don't have the number at hand, but it is a little beyond the 5 million on a yearly basis. And thus far, if you look at the developments throughout the previous year, the outcome of the analysis and the decision-making related to study financing did not lead to a shortfall. Yeah, and that has to do with what you've just seen and what I've concluded, that the numbers are not significantly changing nor increasing. And the more, of course, we would be able to invest in tertiary education on island, the more your study financing data and budgets would also need to be reconsidered. If we would invest in NIPA and if we would invest in USM, or other tertiary educations, you're going to have a different conversation about the needs and the priorities and the relevant resources for it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Minister Whitesell. Lyndon Brown, BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and to the ministers that are present and the ministers that are absent. Minister Marlin, you mentioned sternly that I do not want to interpret what you say, but if I'm going wrong, just direct me. Any civil servant who have not carry out procedures properly will be dealt with. And how?
Thank you for that question, Lyndon Brown. Indeed, what I stated was, if proven that proper procedures have not been followed, all civil servants involved in that action may be held personally liable. We have procurement or procure-to-pay process. We do have processes and procedures here in government, and as the minister indicated, you know, if we receive services from someone, they expect to be paid, but when it gets held up, then the problems start because proper procedures weren't followed. So we have procedures, and everyone should comply with our procedures, and this includes civil servants as well.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Alita Singh of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Roach. Good morning, Prime Minister. Good morning, ministers of the Council. My question follows my colleagues. It's a very strong statement. You've put civil servants on notice. How widespread is the problem, and is there a more or less a dollar figure outstanding that, you know, you thought this was the number, but actually this is the number it's coming up to when people sending invoices? And for how long has this been going on?
Let me take the question. First of all, for how long it's been going on, I can't tell. We know that we came in office on January 15th, and as time goes on, more and more people, they see me and Minister of Finance should have an answer to why I haven't been paid for whatever time it is. I've seen outstanding bills from 2014, so that's 4 years old, and big bills, big amounts, huge amounts, and so you know, like I say, to me, if somebody provides a service and it is properly provided and is properly received and documented, that person should be paid. But government has a process. There are checks and balances. There are checks and balances so that people cannot individually decide, well, you know, I'm going to go by that store and buy parts or buy whatever. It cannot be that way. It must be in accordance with the procedure that government provides, so that there's a paper trail, so that every purchase is as transparent as it could be, and all the departments that are involved from the day something is ordered to the day it is paid for can be followed in a paper trail. There was a No, because the figure is changing almost on a weekly basis, because every time we think we have the figure, then all of a sudden another bill shows up or another person shows up. How come I didn't get paid and stuff like that? So that's the reason why I bring it out now, because it's not that we're chomping at the bit to pay bills because we don't have the liquidity. But it is important for this government, this interim government, if you want to call it that, but it is the government, to try to straighten out stuff and put things in order as much as possible, so that there's got to be a ground zero from where we can go forward as a government. And you know, government is an ongoing, continuing process, and whoever sits in the chairs after me, after us, after whoever, should be able to have a clear picture as to what government's debts are especially to suppliers on St. Martin.
Stephen Cerulean.
Prime Minister, Minister of General Affairs, International Environment Day was observed yesterday. However, on St. Martin, the day was somewhat on a low key. Having said that, now, my question to you as Minister of General Affairs, what is government's plans for the baby dump, or the small dump, little dump, whatever dump you want to call it? What are your plans for the small dump? It was meant to be for temporary purpose?
Thank you, Stephen Cerulean, for that question. Your question is whether the small dump, the baby dump, was meant for a temporary purpose or for a permanent purpose? Is that your question? Temporary. Well, it was created as a temporary solution because, of course, we had Irma, and we couldn't, government at that time could not put more debris on the bigger dump, or some call it the mother dump. So it was a temporary solution. You asked about the plan. The plan that is in place, or that's being worked out right now, is about removing the debris from the smaller dump. And as we have indicated before, this will be part of the first tranche monies that will be allotted to us within short. And discussions are going on right now. I know that the experts were here and are speaking to the Minister of Vromi as it relates to the next step in removing the debris from the so-called baby dump. But the idea is that, because remember, the land there is not government's land. That land belongs to, I believe, a soccer team. I can't remember their names, but I definitely know. No, it's a soccer team. Soccer Federation. That land belongs to the Soccer Federation, and they would definitely like to be able to access that land again to start back their tournaments and soccer tournaments. And therefore, I have received discussions with one of the representatives, and that is their goal. So we would like to see that as well, and I'm sure that the Minister of Education, Youth, and Sports would like to promote all types of sports, especially soccer, because it's a growing field, a growing sport in the island, and they're doing great things within that field. So therefore, all efforts will be made to ensure that they get their land back.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Lyndon Brown.
To the Minister of Education, question to you. I heard that you are inviting teachers. In other words, you are saying that there's a lack of teachers on the island. According to your statement, can you establish how much more teachers that St. Martin wants? And also NIPA. What are the age of people going to NIPA for re-education?
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure whether I mentioned that I was going to invite teachers,
You said that,
but I've highlighted. Yes, I've highlighted a couple of times, and I was alerted also by indeed Teachers Union that we have to be very cautious that we indeed not further challenge indeed the availability of teachers on island, which has been an ongoing concern throughout the last couple of years, the last decade. As you've probably seen, if you look at the labor market, that a significant amount and percentage of the teacher professionals are from abroad, from other countries. So that's one of the reasons that we decided to establish the committee to look at indeed compensation elements, other relevant factors contributing to indeed interest in this profession, how we can indeed further influence and expand campaigns so that indeed our local students in secondary education would choose the teaching profession and therefore that it has been highlighted, of course, as a priority on our priority list for many, many years. So in that extent, there is a shortage. The exact figures in terms of the ability to indeed conclude short-term contracts that may have been highlighted, not to be renewed, and indeed, therefore, the need to recruit new teachers. That's an ongoing process that has intensified, that should be concluded by the various schools, public schools and non-public schools, throughout this month, in the month of June. They have accelerated on it, so the exact numbers, I apologize, I don't have that, but it has been highlighted as a priority, and all schools have addressed it as such. So they started in an early stage to at least have conversations with existing teachers, whether they would stay, whether they have an interest to extend their contract, or whether they are indeed motivated to leave and why. And if that then indeed is concluded with a answer saying like don't have an interest to extend our contract, so that indeed the schools can then intensify their recruitment process. So that's ongoing, and I'm sure that by the end of June and before the ending of the school years, we have more exact overviews of what the status is. But we do hope that we address, because at the same time there has also been very, very positive responses. I've been informed also with my possibility to be at FRED in the Netherlands, that some people from other countries or the Netherlands or more in the region sometimes want to come and support Sint Maarten. You know, so there are people that are not scared away maybe because of the impact and the status of our socio-economic situation, but do have an interest to want to contribute. So that's a very interesting, I think, development as well that we should further encourage, and we hope to do so with the committee, that we indeed want to boost the importance of this profession. It's 800 plus teachers on island, so that's a significant percentage of our labor market.
Thank you, Minister White. Alita Singh.
Thank you again. Minister of Finance, again on the bills, is there a legal cut-off period by which, if you receive an invoice, it either needs to be paid or needs to be logged with government before a payment is made? That's just a follow-up. And then I have a hurricane-related actual question for the Prime Minister. One of your first announcements today was the meeting with the military chief for the Caribbean. Has it been discussed how soon you need to request military assistance, considering what happened after Hurricane Irma? And then also connecting to that is state of emergency. We've just had a subtropical storm Alberto going to Florida. We saw they have their own regulations. It's a completely different country and a different structure. However, it is in the public eye. What now will be done? We had a state of emergency being declared 8 days after Irma. What is now learning from that and what happened? What is now the procedure? How are you thinking as to what will happen should, God forbid, another storm head our way?
Thank you, Alita, for those questions. We discussed with the Commander Peter Jan de Vin that in our follow-up meeting, the high-level talks that we were going to have pretty soon in July, we're going to define everything, the role of the military, the role of what exactly is needed when you're calling a state of emergency, the details that are involved. So from the military's perspective, that they're going to give training as well, an informational session to the Council of Ministers, so that the Council of Ministers also have a clear understanding from the perspective of the military. We are all involved, we have different stakeholders, and it's good while we are preparing that those talks are also, or discussions are also brought forth. And once that meeting is finished with the military, we will give an update on such, but as EUC, we are also given training and sessions with the various ESF groups as to what happens in a state of emergency from our perspectives, from the law. And we're going to, within short, start those sessions with all of the EUC members, and also the Council of Ministers will be invited as well to sit in those sessions so that they too know their role. So they're going to have that information. So the state of emergency, and how soon will you call a state of emergency, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is part of our planning, preparing for this hurricane season. But of course, before we start bringing information out. We are working on internally how we're going to do things differently, and that is important. Also recognizing the things or perhaps areas that didn't go well before, and how we will improve it this time around to ensure that decisions are made within specific periods, depending on the type of hurricanes that we have, the different type of categories, or depending on the type of disaster that we are faced with.
If I may just dovetail into that part, the thing that we have brought forward is, like you mentioned in the United States, for instance, the governors can declare a state of emergency even before a disaster strikes, which triggers certain changes in the way how you operate, triggers help to come in and be available. We are not there yet, but that's definitely what we're proposing, that somehow or the other it gets put into our policies and the way we deal with emergencies, so that we are proactive rather than reactive. With regards to your question on cutoff, we have not determined a cutoff, but I would say that anybody who has any bills that are less than 5 years old should contact government and say, this is what I've supplied, this is who asked me to supply it, and here are the names, and here's what we did, and here's we can prove that it has been supplied, and so we will follow up. The idea is to clean up our payables as much as possible, and like I say, put order in the financial situation for government, so we know where we stand.
Thank you, Minister Ferrier. We now move on to the final round of questions. Please keep this question concise and short, as we are running out of time. Stephen Cerulean, you have the floor.
Minister of Sport, athletes will be traveling to Colombia for the CAC Games. How many athletes and what sport, what type of sport will they be taking part in?
Thank you for your question. The selected sports are sailing, cycling, judo, and aquatics, so swimming. 1 athlete for swimming, 1 for judo, 1 for cycling, and more for sailing, 3 or 4. So I believe, out of my head, I'm saying 7 or 8 athletes. I can provide you the details and their names as well. Yeah, so 4 sports, and for sailing multiple, and the other 3 sports 1.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
but I can provide you with the details and their names, because they need to be highlighted and respected.
Thank you, Minister Whitesell. Lyndon Brown.
Okay, our last question. Congratulations to the ministers. Proper administration. I realize that the ministers have a hard job because there's so much complication. Minister Ferry, there's a lot of administration which is not going according to the book. For instance, people will acquire domain land, minister, and they actually own it automatically. What's the procedure for people, or the people of St. Martin, obtain own a piece of domain land? What's the procedure? Because we are speaking about proper administration.
I think you need to wait till next week when the Minister of Rami is here, because I can't tell you. I would like to, but I can't. I don't know.
Alisa Singh, you have the final question.
Thank you again, Ms. Roach. Prime Minister, on the old government administration building, of course, it's still in a state battered by Hurricane Irma. Is there any update of what will be done with the building? Will it be demolished? Will it be fixed? Or Minister of Finance, so whoever can tell us what will happen.
We've been talking about the building. It's an eyesore as far as we are concerned. It is in the center of our town, and as we speak, we are investigating what the approximate cost could be, as I say, approximate cost could be to tear it down. We would like to do that as soon as possible. The building is now mold infested because of the roof being open. It didn't make sense to repair the roof after the amount of rain that went into the building, and it will be torn down. When and how soon depends on the price and the availability of funds. But it's our intention to clean up the center of our capital city, capital town, including the old fire station also. That has got to come down, and at least have it barren until we determine the next move as to what will replace the area, what will be built in the area.